I introduce my friend Minagrace Knox, who is a therapist I've known for years, who is a wonderful presence, and like the great healers that she's been through stuff and has overcome it. And so there's a sense of commonality in the experience here, and also knowledge in the experience. So it's not random, that it's a very deliberate space that we find ourselves in, and having a chance for someone with experience in helping folks facilitating healing of trauma for Mina Grace to come forward. So thank you so much, Mina Grace, for being here and for sharing this space with us.
I'll unmute myself. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Melanie, and representing the bookstore. And bookstores are magical places. That's where I met Mark. Like, gosh, what, almost a decade ago
Yeah,
now?
easily. Yes, easily. Wonderful.
Want
Yeah.
to definitely share Mark's sentiment of just commending, what brings us together in this space right now and how transformational it is in and of itself. And as we get to explore these topics, this book, the material experiences, I think it falls very much in line with the umbrella of the book that the body keeps score. So I'm just going to invite you to just keep some nurturing attention to what you notice may come up in your body. They say we know the truth when we hear it, and we know our truth when we hear it. So again, that could come up in the discussion, that there is an energy beyond the words. And so there's can be a resonance. And part of what I love about books like this, especially spaces like this, and when we get to do this kind of work, that it's very validating, right? It can put language, perspective, and so forth as to what we've been experiencing in ways we did not recognize. And so again, my encouragement is always to meet whatever comes up with tons of nurturance and care. And that in and of itself is the foundation for healing of any kind of wounding. Just even in talking about the topic many times now with Mark, and just this opportunity to be here today, an aspect of trauma is one of my favorite definitions is here's a really overwhelming experience beyond our natural resources. And the biggest component is that when we are left to be alone in it in some capacity to find our way through. And so again, going back to being in community is foundational for trauma healing, and even restoring connection with self is another big aspect, because it is closing out that loop of isolation and coming back to relationship in a variety of forms. So I was just off and running.
And it's good. It's a good offered writing. So yeah, I think you've started to cover it, but just starting with the question, like, what is trauma?
Yeah, so definitely that what I was just sharing is one of those definitions that definitely resonates, and even going into the book. And, it said that trauma isn't necessarily what happened to you in terms of external circumstances. It's what's happened within us, what's happened within you as a result of these, external circumstances. And so trauma, one of the best ways I also know how to describe it is a way that the body, our internal system, decides to store an experience. So again, in the overwhelm and the feeling of inadequacy that comes up with it, that the system decides, okay, I need to keep this on literally the forefront of my mind, right? I can't afford to put it where I would what I had for breakfast last Tuesday. And so it just becomes this easily accessible, always readily available experience that we are re-experiencing, ultimately in an attempt to be safe. And so again, it goes to one of the common symptoms of a post-traumatic experience, again, it gets covered a lot in the book, is that hypervigilance, right? Because then our number one job in life is to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I think that is the umbrella definition of even the post-traumatic syndrome. And so there is that somatic experience, which again, the book brilliantly talks about, is that it stays alive in our system. It's an experience that doesn't really get to be processed through until we put more intention around it. So we keep re-experiencing it. And another aspect of trauma is that I don't hear talked about as much, but I think is very relevant and we can continue to hold an awareness around, is in the experience, the mind decides, because this happened to me, this means something about me, about you, about the world, about life, about God. And so then we keep holding on to this belief and operating according to this false belief that was embedded as a result of the trauma. And especially the younger we are, the more prone we are to taking responsibility. Children make themselves responsible for everything because they are the sun around which everything orbits according to their mindset. And so again, it's like, this must mean something about me. So different components, and just going back to trauma is multifaceted. And the great news is that it is all healable and we can be set free from it. And we get to be our own liberators with, oftentimes some great support. So I'll pause there for a moment.
Sure thing. Sure thing. Beautifully said. I appreciate the articulation of this. And I just want to add, as we speak here, that one of the main intentions, if not the main intention, is that we do focus on solutions
Mhm.
for trauma, which is, this is why, for real, like just being here is a healing in itself. And just recognizing in, just briefly, my own experience of having done years of EMDR and done psilocybin twice for therapy purposes, and just seeing ultimately where healing 1% of the time is incredibly effective, that we're not trying to kick open a door at all, but just the recognition of, which for me has been one of the values of this book, is oh, that's me. Oh, it's interesting that I have this thought. It's interesting that my mind is racing right now, then my heart's racing when this thing is brought up,
Yeah.
And but just seeing where the awareness of like, okay, well, who am I who's here? And having all that. Yeah. So if I could just pose a question to you, Minagrace, on page 13 in chapter 1, there's a quote, which is, trauma, whether it is the result of something done to you or something you yourself have done, almost always makes it difficult to engage in intimate relationships. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because as a result of trauma, again, that hypervigilance, that armoring that's needed, right? And so the protection at any cost. And at the same time, part of that cost can be engagement with others, right? So like not being fully available and not being able to access trust in the vulnerability that is needed for a connection, right? And so with trauma, the precedence is safety. And again, whatever the belief that says like, you aren't safe or I'm not safe and I engage, then again, in that activation, that takes precedence over connection, and just acknowledging complex trauma when we are wounded in relationship. And then what do we become hypervigilant around? Relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in the healing of that,
Mhm.
involves recognizing the thing that I mention a lot, and I've done this myself, is, and it sounds really simple, but it's effective, which is, okay, here I am right now in this space. There's a door there. I could see what's happening. There's a door there. I could hear my friend downstairs, and there's a dog, and the dog would bark if there was someone coming up. Like, okay, I'm safe right now.
Yes. Yes.
And then doing that with people too.
Absolutely. And I love what you're bringing up, because there's this aspect of trauma that it makes us time travelers. We're,
Hmm.
we're traveling back to the past, and in the hypervigilance, we're already in the future. And so the reconciliation, the healing, and again, getting into solution is, let me be right here, right now, and take note of, in some ways, I'm safer than I've ever been. When we come back to the right here, right now, I often say, like, wear the now moment like a fuzzy blanket, because, the imaginings of the past, thank you, life, that oftentimes the worst is over with the trauma. And then again, the nightmares of our own making in the name of trying to keep us safe, we can be missing out on the now moment. So the checking, noticing is really helpful again in
Mhm.
terms of solution and just the reorientation of oneself.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. And just continuing there, this is on page 17 of the first book, mainly that trauma affects imagination. That oftentimes that people are simply replaying an old reel over and over again rather than being present and have difficulty imagining a future or imagining. And this gets into a spiritual aspect of the power of visualization.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they say that, trauma, when we haven't like been able to give attention to it. And again, I love how, the space is centered in solution is a huge part of the solution is giving attention to what has needed our attention. And I have it like always on my desk here. I love that saying, when you change the way you look at things, the way you look at things change.
Mhm.
Right. And so to turn toward, and that part that thinks a really great way for me, the really great way to take care of Minagrace is to make negative imagining so that she's ready for whatever it is imagined there is to come. And so the restoration and giving attention to like, no, it's safe to be here. Let's notice this and let's continue to heal and make space for positive wonderings, right? And the reclaiming of that, with the imagination, it's a redirection that I don't need to imagine things in that way anymore.
That's a great tool. Can we talk for a moment, Mina Grace, about what is, for those of us who have experience with our minds like going 1,000 miles an hour and such, which I'm sure every single person here can relate to, what what are tools that help us to interrupt that? For me, music does that really well, or
Mhm.
taking in a breath, but it's just recognizing like, oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is the landing with the breath, because again, the body keeps the score when we have all those different like racing thoughts, what could even feel like intrusive thoughts. And again, like we feel our thinking that there can be this activation and just starting with the breath, landing. I'm really big into like putting a nurturing touch on some part in our body that says like, I'm here. And what I have found is commonly talked about out in the world is like ignore or distract. And really what it's about is, wow, something in me needs my attention. See, we have this long time outdated perception of the mind that it is a monolith, that it is one singular orb. And what we find in the reality of things, and even in Dr. Bessel's work, is like really getting into the multiplicity of mind. It doesn't mean we have multiple personality disorder, but it's like, oh, there's a part of me that really wants to go to the party. There's a part of me that doesn't want to go. Right. And we can find that. And even if you watch TV, you'll start to notice it more. People, the way people talk, that we are a multiplicity of parts. And so the racing thoughts, what I've come to understand in this work and supporting clients in is like, okay, let's slow down. Let's take that breath, open that space, like, come talk to me. There's a part that's concerned about this. There's a part that really wants me to know about this. There's a part that's wondering about this. And to get into the practice of giving attention to everything that comes up, because each part believes what it has to say is very important. And especially if we've had traumatic experiences, can hold the intensity of it, believes that it is vital to our survival. And a lot of what we're talking about, mental health and healing, we actually refer to it as self-leadership. So again, like you made reference to the you that came in the room, I would identify it and probably like, oh, that's probably your self energy, the leader in you. We're going to go to this talk tonight, right? And all the other parts that came with you. And so again, when we're in that energy, come tell me what's going on. And so it could want to express in music, or that could be a soothing place to start, writing it out, in a journal, or using different pens and just being able to identify like, oh, there's a lot of me that wants my attention. And as we give it that attention, it starts to relax. She cares, he cares, they care. I can bring my concerns. And again, here's this leader. I'll take care of it for you. I'm here. We're an adult. Look at the exits, look at the grown-up hands, and all of those tools.
That's great. Yeah, that's wonderful. And in that, just the clarity piece of no part of us is wrong or bad. And that as we work on these muscles and having this toolkit of, which part of me is upset, you know, we build up relationships where there need not be a crisis for us to tune into these parts of ourselves.
Mm. No, for sure. And for me, it's like with this awareness, I like to start off my day. I call it holding office hours, just sitting. And it's like, okay, and being a mom, it's like a reference point for me. Who needs to sit on mama's lap? We're about to get into the day, got a
Mm-hmm.
full day ahead. Does any part of me need my attention? Like, I'm worried about this, or play with me, like we're working too much, whatever it is. But it's just, it doesn't need to be crisis. And I think it's a great to be in the practice of that when we're not in crisis. So things like breath work and, using like calming music or visualization. My encouragement is always use it when you don't need it. Develop a strong relationship with these practices so that when we find like more urgency coming up for us internally, externally, there's already a developed relationship of a strengthened muscle around these things.
Right. Yeah. Wonderful. All this stuff is incredibly important and pertinent. So, on page 18, it says, after trauma, the world becomes sharply divided between those who know and those who don't. People who have not shared the traumatic experience cannot be trusted because they can't understand it.
Yeah.
So, sounds like America right now, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And it's
Mhm.
interesting. I was talking about this in work earlier, that aspect of one of the benefits of healing is self-awareness, right? And relatability. So the more we're doing our own work, being able to have a place to come together and be supported in this work, then it in turn is like, oh, I know that, so yeah, in a world that's so divided, and being a person of color, a woman of color nowadays, it's like, can I relate to fear? That person's fear may look different than mine, but I know hypervigilance? Do I know like feeling like others are the enemy in some way due to my own untreated pain? So there's that relatability. So not necessarily an excuse for the hurtful behaviors that people take on, oftentimes from their unexamined, internal worlds. But again, just like this relatability, and then also this shared compassion of, I know pain. I know what it's like to feel locked in something. I know what it's like to feel overwhelmed, and then be able to extend and restore the oneness. I found that my experiences of oneness have been more around my shadow than my light in some ways.
Hmm.
My relatability to other people has been, our connection has been through pain
Yeah.
rather than the great mountaintop moments.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I do think that the phrase when we notice people being upset or angry or projecting or being cruel, is this the context of that's the best they could do
Mm. At the moment.
at the moment? At the moment, yeah. And just recognizing when we, I found this easy. I find doing this easier and easier as I get older, which is, oh, they're about 14. That's interesting. Oh, that's their 8-year-old self. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And just even going back to sensations in the body or awarenesses that come up when we're reading the book, in discussion, doing our work in different ways. One of the things that I find is really interesting and encourage my clients often comes up, what's the sensation? What do you notice? What's the belief? How young is that feeling? Or how small is that feeling right now? And oftentimes we're working between the ages of 5 and 8.
Can I ask why do you think why that age frame, age range? Why do you think?
Yeah, we're really developing a lot of our core worldviews at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we don't tend to, I think that's where also 12-step recovery is helpful. Like they encourage like inventory, but we tend to have this worldview. People are this, I am that. This is what success is, whatever. This is what you do in relationships. And there doesn't tend to be, without intention, the pause dump out the bag, look at what have I been operating according to? Where did I get this? And does it still apply to my very adult life today?
Hmm. That's great. Yeah, that's very helpful. Wonderful. I'm going to ask Minagrace one more question. If anybody has a question for Minagrace, if you want to put it in the chat, and Melanie, maybe you could monitor that. On page 21, the last of the first chapter, which is we have learned that trauma is not just an event that took place sometime in the past. It is also the imprint left by that experience on mind, brain, and body. And then a little further, trauma results in a fundamental reorganization in the way mind and brain manage perception. It changes not only how we think and what we think about, but also our very capacity to think.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Trauma by its nature, it's like the event itself is so intense and it gets so it's too much to take it all in. And so it's very contracted and intense. And what we are left in terms of that reorganization, it's very contracted and intense. So the reorganization of our internal world, and I know, Mark, you and I have talked about this before, where here's the wound, and then here circulating around it are all the ways that I've learned to protect myself. Right. So before, these parts that had different jobs, like I'm going to use imagination in a great way. I'm going to, see people as open and connecting. Then they have to shift their roles and the wound becomes like the queen bee. And then all these parts work for this central hub. And so again, just like the reorientation, and then again, within that is the belief. So if I believe I'm not safe or I'm not enough, then of course, that's going to have an impact on how I see the world, how I think you see me. A lot of the projections that we put out into the world are based on the limited perspective that happens with trauma. And it's very much like heads down in the foxhole, these protectors. This is what I do. This is what I do for them, right? I keep people out. I keep people out. And they don't see I'm lonely. They don't see people are safer, right? Like those parts that get their role and they're just trudging along. And so a huge part of healing too is to, when we connect with those parts, give them the update, right? What do you think? People aren't safe. And it's like, oh, do you know so-and-so in my life, so-and-so in my life? Do you know I'm a grown-up now and I can practice boundaries, that I can let people earn my trust? Like, no, this is all I know. And so it's look up, look around, and help lead that part to have a different experience in our life.
Great. Wonderful. And actually, before we get into I just have one more question because I know one of our bonds is spirituality. And with, one thing I appreciate about you is your balance of the psychological and the spiritual. What has helped you with your spirituality and healing trauma? And what do you find effective with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what comes to mind, and in my own experience with the
Hmm.
trauma, and again, it's fundamental aspects of being alone,
Hmm.
is to connect with the truth that I was never alone.
Hmm.
Never alone. I am not alone. I will never be alone.
Yeah.
And so it is that re-indoctrination. I feel like I've had to like take parts of myself and baptize them in the water. Right. And letting that be okay, that's a part of self-leadership too. These parts that can be afraid or so forth. It's just like, okay, there's a great, big, loving, benevolent force out in the world that considers me. And again, like returning to the truth. They say healing is adjusting to reality. I take that to be my reality. So part of healing is turning toward, reorienting toward that reality. And then, of course, all the beautiful evidence that shows up, which this moment being all together, I'm going to put this in my evidence jar,
Hmm.
right? Benevolence out in the world in the midst of all the other news reports that we are sitting here together on a Tuesday evening. There's good in the world.
And that we are not alone,
Yeah.
and that we're not the only ones. And it's okay to have a held space. It's okay to be seen and heard in the held space. And it's okay to know that everyone matters. and that
Yeah.
we're worthy of change, we're worthy of good things happening.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And again, noticing how that feels, those
Mm-hmm.
words, how it lands for us. I love that saying, we know the truth when we hear it. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just noticing how that feels. The body's a great barometer for those
Mm-hmm.
things.
For sure. Sure. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing so much, Mina Grace. I really appreciate it. Yeah, let's get into questions. Melanie, what do you notice there with questions or?
Nobody has sent any questions in the
Okay.
chat,
Okay.
but
Do you have a question, Melanie?
not off the top of my
Okay.
head.
Wonderful. We'll go to the group view here. Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask? Yeah, go ahead, Susan Lander.
Hi, thank you
Hi.
so much. I'm here.
You are here.
I know. I have not read the book, but I am in fact
It's all
here.
good. It's all good.
I know. I'm
There's
proud
no
of
quiz.
myself.
There's no
I'm
quiz.
proud of myself.
Yeah.
And it's really, I'm like, you know what? Just gonna go. And it's actually really interesting. So yeah, I've already have some takeaways here, but I have sort of a different relationship with traumatic experiences. And Mark knows this. I have something called multiple chemical sensitivity. I don't know if you're aware of that. So it's kind of like, I mean, I literally am constantly and unpredictably or predictably getting exposed to things that are gonna like make me sick. And I realized only recently that I have been basically traumatized continuously for 20 years. And I wonder why I want to hide out of my house all the time. And even that doesn't work all the time. But so, like in that context, how does this like work? I am in a constant state of, well, I try to ignore it unless it's happening in the moment. I mean, I've come a really long way, but I don't kind of know how to put this into a context in a way that, I don't know, make me feel better. I thought healing is adjusting to reality is interesting. It doesn't mean that healing is your fixed.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting. But
Yeah.
anyway, so I don't know, just thoughts on that. It's kind of like an overactive triggering amygdala. So how do you even like deal with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts or have an experience with anyone who's had
Sure.
this,
Yeah.
or just like severe allergies, maybe
Yeah.
something like that.
Go ahead, Mina Grace. What do you think?
Yeah. Thanks.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate everything that you're sharing. And I have worked with somebody who had like high sensitivity. And I remember now, like, usually I would run essential oils in my office. She's like, no more essential, like no essential oils.
I just, my heart, my whole like body just like,
yeah,
it's like,
right.
Yeah.
And so noticing the activations, right? Like no perfumes, I just like would set it up for her, like don't come on a cleaning day, like all those things when it was more in person. So I just want to validate you right now. It is very real. Is very real. And like, okay, what do I do? It's just like, if you're even noticing the somatic activations, it's just like, okay, I'm here. And it could be the residuals of when you were blindsided walking into spaces and facing those chemical reactions, that there may be even a visceral sensitivity to that. And so being able to, breathe, hold yourself in whatever way, again, like address the somatic nervous system aspect. And, I always encourage, like, really, if you want to go deeper into these things, like getting the support of a professional that can kind of like hold you tether while you go explore, because there may be some beliefs that you've come to have around the world and how safe it is and your sensitivities, right? And just being able to get a better understanding of how these experiences have impacted you. And then from that, again, from that self leader, from that being your own great caretaker, being able to tend to, and then, okay, this is how I'm going to take care of us moving forward.
Yeah.
It's like, seems like from the power position instead of like
Yeah.
like, yes, like the blindsided thing. It's like I constantly live from our blind side to blind side, it's kind of like it's a different perspective, I guess.
Mhm.
Sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the awarenesses that you have today that you probably didn't once upon a time. I imagine you're more, and just from a grounded place, looking out for yourself. Like, hey, do you use cleaners or whatever? Asking questions like you're talking about empowered experience of these things.
Mhm. Hmm. Well, thank you. Interesting things to think about. I
Wonderful.
appreciate it.
Yeah. And getting into the belief that the world is safe. And this is where we work 1% at a time.
Mhm.
And also is recognizing, this is kind of a big thing, just to mention it, that, we are detoxifying the world. And this is one of the roles of autism, which is, kids who cannot handle anything that's toxic, including toxic emotions. And leading into them becoming adults, of just seeing like, what is the introduction of that into the world? What is that spark? I have good friends who have a great podcast called Autism Parenting Secrets, Cass and Len, who are New York executives, and their son was diagnosed with autism. They live in North Carolina. They are kind of off the grid. Their lives completely changed, and they've modeled this of like how things are happening. But beyond autism, just seeing this space where the world is a little bit too much for us, especially as sensitive people. Chemicals, we haven't even talked about the phones and stuff like that. We'll do that another day. but just seeing like where for sensitive people, there's just too much happening. But just trusting there's a solution to it, and just having that intention that the world is safe and that we're creating a world that is safe for everyone, where everyone matters and everyone counts. Yeah. Thank you, Susan, for your question. Thank you, Minagrace. Yeah, Shoshana, you have a question?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for
welcome.
being here. So recently, and actually periodically throughout my life, I'll have a memory of a trauma I've experienced come to the surface. However, it doesn't trigger me to feel like I'm back in that moment. However, it kind of feels like it's ready to release. And I haven't quite figured out how to transition that out. If you have any, if this makes any sense, / if you have any recommendations, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're talking about definitely resonates and falls within that aspect of the stored energy, the unprocessed energy that comes up in those experiences. And so the book offers a number of different great exercises. That's one of the things that getting into the practicalities. And Mark, you'd made mention of that. And so TRE, I don't know if you've heard of that, like tremoring, like kind of like supported, guided. It's even like with used within like yoga in some ways. And even Dr. Bessel, he's really into yoga. And so just any way that there's a nurturing, safe experience of connection with the body, and really finding of the different options, what feels good to you, right? Like of all, like this great buffet. And I loved, again, Mark, how you talked about like there's so much available to heal trauma like never before. And then really from that place of self-awareness, like, okay, what's my way? So there are lots of ways, and I just encourage you to explore. And I believe like there'll be a ding, you'll hear about something, you'll probably feel it, and then just with a great, knowledgeable practitioner to help hold space for you to experience that. So I appreciate the question.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you, Shoshana, for the question. And it's interesting space of when we are evolving and seeing that evolution, as Shoshana was mentioning, of ready to let go of something. And perhaps there's a space in that to recognize who we are in this moment, and that we're not the world's janitor, and that it's okay for us to let some things go and evolve.
Mhm.
And to recognize the mythology around change, which in truth, we are constantly changing, and we're really good at change. We grow up.
Yes.
We evolve, and we have this mythology, especially in America, like he didn't change in 76 years, of like how horrible, you know, and just seeing this space of, not to put people down, but just this space of it's okay to change, okay to evolve. But I think if we could just talk for a moment, Minagrace, about why Dr. Bessel lands on yoga. What's your understanding of that?
Yeah, I can speak to it from a place of my own experience of
Sure.
yoga, one of my biggest somatic healers. And I went into it, like when the yoga teacher would be like, what's your intention? I'm like, I'm here to heal from trauma, like even in terms of my nervous system. And I think it's a great both practical tool and then just even like metaphorically, it's that with practice, there is this evolution that keeps happening. I'm able to get closer to touching my toes. I'm able to feel into this tightness or sensation and have a different relationship where before I would avoid it. And even, in the practice, I would cry. Like for years, I would just go cry all over my mat. And I think it's only in the past year that I've finally stopped crying. And if I need to cry, I still cry. Right. And so I think it's just can be representative of a space for this constant evolution and change. And I love what you're talking about because I have found it to be one of those foundational aspects that we are designed to heal. And the whole thing of this, like what isn't aligned with our divine design, it's like a splinter. It wants to come out. And then again, getting to be the facilitator in different ways of our own, liberation from things that don't fit us. We're truth. If we're holding a lie, it's going to make us uncomfortable. It wants to come out. And then all the extra efforting, right? So 75 years, you didn't change. I'm like, ooh, 75 years. What did you have to change to not change? Right? So,
Good point. Good point. Yeah. What was the requirement in place?
yes,
You know,
to get this
yeah.
kind of streak.
Yeah, there it is. I wonder also, or at least my experience with yoga, and I think also it's worth mentioning as this is toward the conclusion of the book of like when he's landing on solutions and talking about his evolution of using yoga as a healing element in trauma, which is this need not be Olympian, like, it is stretching, it is being in be it restorative yoga or hatha yoga, whatever kind it is, or even doing it on our own, of just like having a time and a space. And there's something about the ritual of the mat of like, this is a held space that is safe. And we go to yoga, either alone or in a group with an intention.
Yeah,
And that's
for sure.
about self-care and just understanding the different levels of integration that happen during that practice.
Mhm.
I think one of the central ones, and we touched upon this earlier in our conversation, of allowing the brain space to process things. And in our busy lives where there's can be constant information, this is way easier to see, I think, in teenagers, of there's constant information and constant distraction. There's no space to process. And when we're doing something like yoga or meditation or walking in nature or being quiet, that there's a space for everything to settle
Yeah.
in and process.
For sure. And like what you're talking about with the EMDR, or if
Mhm.
there's some kind of assisted, all the forms of true trauma recovery, it's about getting out of the way
Mhm.
so that the healing can happen. That
Mhm.
again, like that's so much of what my work is like, I stay out of the way. I encourage people I work with, let's stay out of the way. Let's trust where your big, beautiful brain knows where to go to get to the root of this so that you can give attention to it. Right. And so again, the more we're able to stay out of the way and just allow that neutrality and have the experiences on the mat, listening to music in nature, then it does also prime the pump for those revelations and those liberations to happen.
Yeah, well said. Also, it just occurs to me with what you just said of like the seeming absence of fun in our current era. Is anybody having fun? Anybody? Yeah,
I'm
just
learning how to ice skate. So
are
yeah,
you?
yes, I'm
Great.
learning. Yeah.
Good. Good. That's wonderful. But just seeing of you know in everything that was limited in the pandemic and coming out of it feels like fun has gotten deprioritized along with sleep, and just seeing the essential nature of both those things, both those dynamics. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Why don't we take a moment and we've talked about a lot of different things. Why don't we have an experience here? I'm just going to take a few moments to work with the angels and to work with our spirituality. So if we could just, we'll do that for about, 5-6 minutes or so. If we could just gently take in a breath. And thank you, Mother, Father, God. Thank you, archangels and ascended masters, for the perfect grace, perfect clarity, and perfect peace that is here for each of us and all of us right now. We celebrate this moment of community. We celebrate this moment of honor, and we choose to honor ourselves right now with beautiful breath, with a wonderful sense of existence, that we are actually alive, we are actually here, and that we actually matter, and that it's safe for good things to happen. It's safe to be safe. It's safe to be connected. It's safe to be part of something. It's safe for good things to happen. And we celebrate the presence of the angels, the archangels, our spirit guides and goddesses, and we celebrate incredible peace being with us right now. So we'll just gently breathe into all that. And just right where you are right now, if we could just breathe in. And if we could notice Archangel Michael, who's the angel of clearing and protection, who could be with each of us at once. If we could just notice Archangel Michael sharing space with you right where you are, right at this moment. Whether you see him, feel him, hear him, or know that he's there, which might be very subtle. If we could just gently breathe in. And if we could just gently notice Archangel Michael paying attention to you with unconditional love, which can include a radiant smile and bright eyes seeing you. And if we could let Archangel Michael take care of you in this moment. So we'll just gently breathe into that. And if we could very simply add and enhance this moment with our free will, and we'll just very gently say our own names out loud. I'll demonstrate. I am Mark. So just saying your own name. I am. I'm not anybody else. And saying your own name. I am Mark. It is safe for me to be safe. Thank you, Archangel Michael, for clearing my energy and my environment. Thank you, Archangel Michael, for clearing my energy and my environment. And if we could also say out loud, thank you, Archangel Michael, for individualizing my energy. Thank you, Archangel Michael, for individualizing my energy. And we'll just breathe in and we'll let Archangel Michael do all that. Wonderful. And if we could also say out loud, thank you, Archangel Michael, for surrounding me with 1,000 feet of unconditional love. Thank you, Archangel Michael, for surrounding me with 1,000 feet of unconditional love. So we'll just breathe into that. And if we could notice from your heart chakra, Archangel Michael curating this endless well of unconditional love, which might look like white light. And if we could notice Archangel Michael saturating every single cell in your body with unconditional love, every single system in your body being saturated with unconditional love. And we'll notice Archangel Michael facilitating 1,000 feet of unconditional love in front of you, moving through walls and windows, and past trees and through trees and cars and sidewalks and structures and people, and 1,000 feet of unconditional love behind you, 1,000 feet of unconditional love to your left, to your right, above you, and beneath you. So we'll just breathe in and we'll just notice how big 1,000 feet is. And if we can notice unconditional love, and if we define unconditional love as meaning no matter what has happened that you are loved, no matter what hasn't happened that you are loved, and no matter what might or might not happen that you are loved in every moment, including this moment, and that you are worthy of love. So we'll just gently breathe into that. And if we could just gently sense and notice where some relaxation has happened for you. For me, it's like in the back of my neck, back of the head. And if we could just notice, in the spirit of moving things 1% at a time, let's just notice what it's like to be 1% more safe, 1% more present, and welcoming good, more good into our lives right now. So we'll just gently breathe into all that. And with love and peace, we'll just make a gentle request in agreement with Archangel Michael, and we'll use our free will to say out loud, "Thank you, Archangel Michael, for being with me always." And we'll just gently breathe into that. Wonderful. So we'll just gently breathe in and we'll just notice this spaciousness that remains. And that we are seen, heard, and included. And we'll, with spiritual manners, we'll gently say out loud, "Thank you, Archangel Michael." Wonderful. Great. Good work, everyone. Thank you all for doing that. Great. Wonderful. Wonderful. I want to ask Melanie to share. One of the impulses to do this, to have this, is not only to talk about trauma, but to shine a light on New Renaissance Bookstore and to give them some attention and love. So not only is there opportunity, be that in person if you're in Portland or online, to get the book if you haven't, but Melanie has created lovingly a list of resources. Melanie, do you want to share that? Yep.
Yes, so I collected some different resources, books, crystals, flower essences, card decks, things that might be useful in your healing journey. This is by no means an exhaustive list at all, but I tried to carefully curate things that I thought might appeal to a variety of different people with different experiences. I will send out a PDF of it to all of you so that you can look through it. And I tried to include some information about, not really about the books, I figured you could look those up on your own, but the crystals and the flower essences, I did write what they're best used for and why they might be beneficial in trauma healing. And yeah, New Renaissance is a beautiful, amazing place. I have never felt so blessed and supported in a working environment. And like Mark said, people here really do kind of walk the talk, and we put our all into the store, all of our love, all of our energy, and we have events, free and paid events, that you are welcome to join us. We would love to have you. But even if you just want to stop in at the store and you just want to sit down, we've got beautiful bench seats. You can just relax, listen to some healing music, have a good conversation with any of our staff members, and we're really happy to help you. And the whole point of this store is to be a resource center for people of all different paths, all different backgrounds, and we try and cater to everybody's needs as much as possible. So we really appreciate you coming here to this event, and would love to see you in the store. But if you can't make it in, we do have an online website. Just so you know, it's only kind of our books and media items on there, not our crystals or jewelry or any of that kind of stuff. but we do get part of the proceeds. We partner with bookshop.org so that you guys can order some stuff from us and still support us. So this book is available online and in the store if you would like.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melanie. And thanks for creating that resource. I did put in the chat room the link to the bookstore.com that Melanie mentioned about for this book, The Body Keeps a Score. Yeah, wonderful. Great. Minagrace, any concluding thoughts that you have?
Well, first of all, just extreme gratitude. Thank you, Mark and Melanie, for, first of all, just holding this space and this work that I do. I love to be witness to these experiences. And also thank you for the honor of being able to share within it. And the one thing I'd like to close with is just encouraging self-compassion all along the way. Whatever information, whatever resonates as you continue on in the learning and supporting one another and the healing. Practicing self-compassion is always my encouragement. And even when we encounter parts that may feel frustrating to us in some ways, I appreciate, I've heard it said before, like assume innocence, that whatever comes up, love it, assume it's innocent and has been waiting for you in some way. So I'll close with that. Thank you again so much, Mark, for the invitation.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Minagrace, for sharing your heart and your expertise, and for also just verbalizing things, of just like putting it, articulating it as well as you do, so it's digestible, and just coming to the conclusion of this came through in one of the angel groups that I do. It came forward, I think, last Saturday, which is that we don't suck, just simply said, and that we're really hard on ourselves. And this is perhaps something to interrupt over time. And I do want to honor once again Minagrace for her time and her care. Thank you so much. And Minagrace, am I right? You're booked up with clients? Is that a continued thing, or can people? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, wonderful. I'm gonna do two things at once. I'm gonna put Minagrace's website just so people have that as a resource. I'll put that in the chat room, and also there's that. And Minagrace is on Instagram also, and she's a great resource. I want to acknowledge Melanie for all the work that she's put into this and for holding space and representing the store. So thank you so much, Melanie. Yeah. And I want to thank all of you for being here, and thank you for your time and your attention. And we will continue for the next 3 weeks after this, and we'll explore the more that's in the book, and also just more about solutions, and talking about the different influences. Mentioned briefly the phones. I think it's a major thing, constant agitation, but we'll come up with solutions for these things and experience. And I welcome also your questions and things that that are on your mind. So I really do appreciate your presence and being part of this health space. We have this recorded, and I'll put it on YouTube, and I'll share that with the store, and I think they'll put on their YouTube channel. So thank you all so much for coming forward. I really do appreciate your presence. And I wish you all a really good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate
Mark,
your presence.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, East Coasters, for staying up. Yeah. There's
Thank you,
several, I
everybody.
know.
Thank you.
I know several of you past your bedtime. There it is. Yeah. But thank you all.
Thank you.
Welcome. Have a good night, everyone.
Two.
See ya.